All right, so today we're going to continue our lesson on the number line, and we're going to start here by representing fractions, mixed numbers, and decimals on a vertical number line. So if we remember from the previous lesson, a vertical number line goes up and down. So we're going to start here at the bottom. We're going to extend our line up, and we want to represent the fractions 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, and 4/5 on a vertical number line. So we're going to start at the bottom. The lowest number always goes at the bottom of a vertical number line. And so we have 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, and 4/5. Remember, you want to have that consistent spacing as best you can. So for part B, we want to represent the decimals 2, 2.2, 2.4, 2.6, ... 4 on a vertical number line. So you'll notice here we have this ... and that means that we're going to follow that established pattern, that established interval. And if you notice, we're going up by 2/10. So that ... means we're going to include all those values between 2 and 6/10 and 4 that follow the pattern of going up by 2/10. So once again, we're using a vertical number line. So we're going to start down here at the bottom, extend our line up, and we start with 2, 2 and 2/10, keep our spacing, 2 and 4/10, 2 and 6/10, 2 and 8/10, 3, 3 and 2/10, 3 and 4/10, 3 and 6/10, 3 and 8/10, and finally 4. All right, so for number 10 here, we need to fill in the missing decimals on the number line. And you can see our number line extends all the way down. And we start with 1/10, or I'm sorry, 1/100th down here at the bottom. And then we have a space, and then we have 4/100ths. So that means that this missing value is 2/100ths, and this missing value then would be 3/100ths. Then we have 4/100ths, 5/100ths, and if we have 5/100ths and then 7/100ths, in between 5/100ths and 7/100ths would be 6/100ths. Then there's 7/100ths, 8/100ths. Our next value would be 9/100ths, and then the value after that would be, you could put 1/10, or you could put 10/100ths. Either one is acceptable. So we have a couple of inequalities that we need to finish, and we're comparing 1/10 to 5/100ths. So if we look at our number line, if we go back, we have 1/100th here, which is our 10/100ths, and then our 5/100ths is here. Well, since 1/10 or 10/100ths is higher up on the number line, that's going to have more value. So 1/10 is greater than 5/100ths. And then the same thing here. We have 2/100ths compared to 7/100ths. Well, if we look at our number line, we have 7/100ths, that's at the top there, and 2/100ths is below it, so 2/100ths is less than 7/100ths. And for these, we do want to create a vertical number line, and we want mixed numbers greater than 6 but less than 7, and we want an interval of 1/6. So I'm going to scroll this down just a little bit to give myself a little bit more room for my number line. So I'm going to start here at the bottom, bring my line up, and I want mixed numbers greater than 6 but less than 7 with an interval of 1/6. So that means I'm going to have 6 and 1/6 down here at the bottom, 6 and 2/6, or if you put 6 and 1/3, that is also acceptable. 6 and 3/6, or 6 and 1/2 would be next. 6 and 4/6, or 6 and 2/3, and then finally 6 and 5/6 would be your top number. Because if you added another 1/6, that would be 6 and 6/6, which is 7. positive fractions less than 1 with an interval of 1/12 between each pair. So again, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit, give myself a little bit more room. I'm going to start down here at the bottom, extend up, and I would have 1/12. And then if you want to give yourself a little bit more room, you can put values going alternating sides. So I want to give myself a little bit more room, and writing fractions takes up some space. So if I alternate sides, I can actually put these closer together. So after 1/12 would be 2/12, or you could put 1/6, which would be followed by 3/12 or 1/4, 4/12 or 1/3, 5/12, which stays 5/12, 6/12 or 1/2, 7/12, 8/12 or 2/3, 9/12 or 3/4, 10/12 or 5/6, and up here at the top, 11/12. Decimals between 11 and 4/10 and 15 with an interval of 4/10 between each pair. So again, I have that vertical number line, and it says between. So since it says between, I am not going to include 11 and 4/10 and 15. And since my interval is 4/10 off to the side here, I'm going to see what my first value would be. So I'm going to take 11 and 4/10. I'm going to add 4/10 to that, which would give me 11 and 8/10 down here at the bottom. I'm going to put 11 and 8/10. And then to find the next value, I'm going to add 4/10 to my previous value, and that would give me 12 and 2/10. So that would be next up, and I would continue adding 4/10 to continue finding those values. That would be 12 and 6/10. And I would add 4/10 again. That would give me 13. And then, of course, if you add 4/10 to 13, you'll get 13 and 4/10. I probably don't need to work that one off to the side, but I will continue adding here. And then you would add 4/10 again to get your next value, which is 14 and 2/10. And then, of course, you'd add 4/10 again to get 14 and 6/10. And then you wouldn't put 15 because you want to be between 11 and 4/10 and 15. Decimals greater than 7 and 2/10 but less than 9 and 6/10, and we want to use an interval of 3/10 between each pair of decimals. This one's very similar to the one we just finished. Instead of starting with 11.4, we start with 7.2. Instead of ending at 15, we end at 9.6. Instead of an interval of 4/10, it's 3/10, but the concept is going to be the same. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom. And since I want to be greater than 7 and 2/10, I'm going to take 7 and 2/10 and add 3/10 to it. Very similar to what I did in the previous problem. And that's going to give me 7 and 5/10. And just like in the previous one where I added 4/10, this time I'm going to add 3/10 to the previous value. So that would give me 7 and 8/10. And I would add 3/10 again to get 8 and 1/10. I would add 3/10 again to get 8 and 4/10. I would add 3/10 again to get 8 and 7/10. And add 3/10 again. And if you have to do the work off to the side, do the work off to the side. Take the time you need to get your answers accurate. And then I would add 3/10 again, and just like before, I can add 3/10 to 9 pretty easily. That would be 9 and 3/10. And that's where I'd stop, because the next one would be 9 and 6/10, but I want values less than 9 and 6/10. And our final vertical number line that we're going to create today in this lesson, we want positive decimals less than 7 and 5/10 with an interval of 7,500. So I'm going to scroll down, give myself a lot of room here. And this is, again, very similar to the ones we did. So I'm going to start with 75 hundredths, and I'm going to add 75 hundredths to that, which will give me 1.5 or 1.50. I'm going to add 75 hundredths to that. I'm going to get 2 and 25 hundredths. And I'm going to add 75 hundredths to that. And this is similar to if you have $2.25, you get 75 more cents. You get $3. So we get 3. And if you add 75 hundredths to 3, you get 3.75. Well, at this point, I've noticed something. I've noticed that these two both end in 75 hundredths. And the way that I can get from this to this is by adding 3. And so if I add 3 to each of the next ones, I'll get the next values. So I'm going to add 3 to 1 and 50 hundredths, and that would give me 4 and 50 hundredths. Add 3 to 2 and 25 hundredths, and that would give you 5 and 25 hundredths. Add 3 to 3 to get 6, and then add 75 hundredths to 6, or you can add 3 to 3 and 75 hundredths. Either way, you get 6 and 75 hundredths. So with that, you do need to have a good sense of numbers. So have your number sense developing would help you out there. So you only have to add 3 instead of adding 75 hundredths each time. You can use a number line to help determine which number has greater value. On a horizontal number line, the number that lies farthest to the right is the one with the greatest value. So since 35 is farther right than 33, 35 is greater than 33. So just to make sure that we're clear on which symbol means which, we're going to rewrite 110 is less than 250 using one of those symbols. And so I'm going to rewrite the 110. I'm going to rewrite 250, and the proper symbol to use is that symbol there. That stands for less than. So now that we're clear on symbols, we can start comparing. Now the book is going to have you compare fractions using a number line, and I believe that using a number line would not be as efficient. So in order to compare two fractions, you must have a common denominator. Well, when you have a denominator of 3 and a denominator of 6, a good common denominator to use would be 6. So to get from 3 to 6, we have to multiply by 2. So we'd have to multiply 2 by 2 to get 4. And when you compare 4/6 to 5/6, well, 4 out of 6 is less than 5 out of 6. Same thing with decimals. The book is going to have us use a number line, and I don't believe that the number line is the most efficient way to do this. So when you compare two decimals, you start by comparing their whole numbers. So what's in front of the decimal point? So we have a 1 and a 1. Since those are equal, we cannot yet determine which one has more value. So then you go place to place after decimal point. So you look at the digit in the tenths place, which is 3, the digits in the tenths place, which is 1. They are not equal, which means one has greater value than the other. And since 3 is greater than 1, 1 and 3/10 would be greater than 1 and 15 hundredths. So if we're comparing 3 and 9/10 to 3 and 3/10, our whole numbers are the same. They're equal, so that's not going to help us determine which one has more value. But 9/10 is greater than 3/10, so 3 and 9/10 is greater than 3 and 3/10. For number 17, our whole numbers are equal, so that doesn't help us at all. So we go to the digit in the tenths place, we have a 1 and a 7. 1 is less than 7, so 2 and 17 hundredths is less than 2 and 71 hundredths. For number 18, our whole numbers are 14 and 13. 14 is greater than 13. We do not have to look at the digits after the decimal point. And then for number 19, we have a mixed number and we have an improper fraction. So we can either convert our mixed number to an improper fraction or our improper fraction to a mixed number. Either way, we should get the same result. So I'm going to take this first one and convert it. So I'm going to take my denominator times whole number, which gives me 96. Add the numerator of 5 to get 101, which would make this 101 twelfths. 101 twelfths is greater than 100 twelfths. There may be situations where you have to compare a fraction to a decimal. And when that situation occurs, it would be best to put them into a common unit. So either use two fractions or use two decimals. And we want to start to know different conversions. And two of them are right here. We should all know that 1/2 is equivalent to 0.5 or 5/10. And we should all know that 3/4 is equivalent to 75 hundredths or 0.75. And the third one, we should know that 1/4 is equivalent to 25 hundredths. So knowing those three to start would be a great place to start. So if we want to figure out which is greater, 1/4 or 3/10, well, we just established that 1/4 is equivalent to 25 hundredths. So we would compare 25 hundredths to 3/10. Whole numbers are both zeros, so they're equal. So you compare your tenths place. 2 is less than 3, so 3/10 would be greater. Which is lesser, 62 hundredths or 3/5? So in this case, we can figure out that 62 hundredths as a fraction is 62 over 100. We find a common denominator. A good common denominator of 5 and 100 is 100. So we would take 5 times 20 to get 100. So we take 3 times 20 to get 60. So 62 hundredths compared to 60 hundredths. 62 hundredths is greater than 60 hundredths. So therefore, 3/5 is lesser. And which is greater, 1/2 or 55 hundredths? Well, we know that 1/2 is 0.5. So if we compare 0.5 to 0.55, whole numbers are equal, tenths are equal. 1/2 doesn't have a digit in the hundredths place, but 55 hundredths does. 5 is greater than nothing, so 55 hundredths is greater. For number 21, we're comparing 2/10 to 1/4. Well, we should know that 1/4 is 25 hundredths. 25 hundredths, or 2/10 would be less than 25 hundredths. 3/4 is 75 hundredths. 75 hundredths is greater than 7/10. 0.89 would be 89 hundredths. If we multiply both the numerator and denominator by 20 and 4/5, that would give us 80 hundredths. 89 hundredths is greater than 4/5. 25 hundredths would be written like that as a fraction. Multiply both of these by 20 again. So that would give us 20 over 100. 25 hundredths is greater than 20 over 100. And 24 is actually the exact same as 21. For number 25, this would be 3/10. We can make 2/5 4/10. 4/10 is greater than 3/10. And finally, for 26, if we look at 26 hundredths, we know that that's less than 1/2. If we look at 5/8, we know that's greater than 1/2. Well, a number that's less than 1/2 is going to be less than a number that's greater than 1/2. So this was today's lesson, our second lesson on number lines. And as always, I hope this helps.